By the food here.
What's up, everybody? I am Brett L. Pape, and I am with Coach Bruce, and this is week 11 of the Coach Approach. Coach, how are you, brother? It looks like you're in another damn hotel.
I am also trying to chew my last bite of food here as we go live, but I'm out here in good old Rancho Cucamonga, California, man, visiting customers and trying to sell the dream.
There you go. There you go. Hey, we had a hell. Speaking of a dream, I think last weekend was a dream for NFL football fans who just enjoy watching great games, because we certainly had our share of those last week.
Oh, phenomenal week of football. I mean, you had some key injuries, which we'll get into. You had some great matchups. You had some overtimes. You had some fumbles. You had some penalties that weren't called in critical moments. It's just another week here in the NFL, man.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. And I want you to check out this new hat. I got a yards per hat. The guys over there with Alex Johnson, and I can't tell them enough times, thank you so much for the opportunity we've gotten here to be able to have 2 shows a week. Really love what we do on Sundays with the start and sit. It's been a lot of fun with these guys, and man, I'll support them any way I can.
No, hey, Alex has given us a great opportunity with this podcast. We've also got Matt, who does a phenomenal job editing, stuff with Project 32, and he sends us statistical breakdowns every week that we get to talk about snap share and kind of what teams are doing, which is great information for the podcast we do on Sunday morning with start and sits. But absolutely excited to be a part of what Yards Per is doing. Those guys are growing, and it's been a great team to work with for sure.
I don't know if you've watched, but I love Alex's show Saturday nights. It's kind of a Q&A with a lot of fans, but also he gets a little bit into the start and sits for the next day. Great show. It's definitely a must watch. Hey, let's get right into the games that we talked about being great last week. And the one we're going to start off right off the bat is Minnesota 33, Buffalo 30. Minnesota's now 8-1. Buffalo's now 6-3. I'll tell you, to get that type of win on the road, it was a hell of an effort by Minnesota, and it was a great game to watch. Kirk Cousins, I'll tell you, that guy has got all 53 guys on that roster behind him. I mean, he completes 30 passes out of 50 for 357 yards. Justin Jefferson continues to prove if he's not the best receiver in the league, he's certainly mine. 10 receptions, 197 yards and a touchdown. And, during our Sunday show, we both talked about, as an NFL organization, we probably would have sided sitting Josh Allen out. He's coming off the UCL injury. We were worried about what that can mean long term. He played, and I think we would both agree he struggled, but we don't think he struggled because of the injury. What were your thoughts on the game, Coach?
Obviously it was a great game. It's what the fans want to see, right? You want to see great football. You get Minnesota 7-1 coming into the game. It's Buffalo at 6-2, and Buffalo's probably got one of the best rosters in the NFL. Them in Philadelphia, and I think San Francisco now with what they've done with CMC. But Minnesota 79 plays for 480 yards to Buffalo 72 plays for 486 yards. Very evenly matched. Both teams over 6 yards per play. Both teams were balanced in the pass and run game. Threw for over 300 yards. Both teams ran for 145 plus. So a great matchup. And I think what's interesting is Kirk Cousins goes 30 of 50 for 357. You got into the numbers a little bit. He's a guy that continues to win. I think the biggest difference is what Kevin O'Connell has brought to that team. You see the video of him on the plane with the gold chains, having some fun with it. You see him having a lot more fun than I think he did when he was with Mike Zimmer, who was more of a stoic head coach on the sideline. It wasn't a lot of personality, and you're starting to see a little bit more of that come out. And I think the guys in that locker room are buying into what they're doing. And Dalvin Cook, RB2 on the week. Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 2 on the week. I mean, that's exactly what you expect from that offense and the production there. Josh Allen was tough because from a pure football perspective, yeah, you and I did talk about, hey, from an NFL standpoint, you're 6-2. It's not a game you have to have. This is a playoff team. It's got Super Bowl aspirations. But from a pure football standpoint, yeah, you and I were talking about, is it worth starting Josh Allen this week? But 29 of 43, 330 yards, 6 carries, 84 yards. He does it again on the ground, but he had some critical interceptions, and he's had, I think, 3 games in a row where he's had some issues in the red zone and with, turning the ball over. So we've got to fix that. I think Buffalo is going to be just fine. Devin Singletary, 13-47, but he got in the end zone twice. Stephon Diggs doing his thing at wide receiver 7. Gabe Davis stepped up, 6 catches, 93 yards, and a touchdown as well. So I think it's exactly what we hoped it was going to be. I think Buffalo is going to be just fine. I'm excited about what Minnesota's doing. I'm a little scared as a Cowboys fan. We got to face them this week in Minnesota. We'll get into that a little bit later, but great game, man.
So you're not worried. They're coming off 2 straight losses. I know Buffalo was a team. You've talked about their roster construction all year long. You talked about them being a favorite of yours to represent the AFC and the Super Bowl. Not worried about this? Are you feeling like everything's going to be okay when it's all said and done for them?
Yeah, I do, but I will say this. I think if you have to go into Kansas City, we saw what happened last year, the game that went into overtime. Buffalo didn't get a chance to get the ball back, and the game's over, and you thought you had that game wrapped up, but you gave the wrong guy 13 seconds on the clock. But I think this is a year that, with Kansas City and what they're doing, I think, and how they're playing right now, if the season, the playoffs were to start right now, I would lean Kansas City. But we have a lot of football left. There's a reason why teams don't go 17-0 or 15-2 or 16-1. It's difficult to win. And look, they played a Minnesota team that's 7-1 that's balling out right now. So I think Buffalo is going to be just fine. So hey, we gotta start and sit question. We want to hit it. You want to hit Quail Man up real quick?
Well, I mean, I was just kind of looking at it. Quail, first and foremost, as a quail hunter, I want to know. I hope that me admitting that I'm a quail hunter, that you're not a quail lover and you just have a bunch of quails inside your house. But if you're a quail hunter, I leave next Thursday for my first quail hunting trip right after Thanksgiving. Aside from that, let's move on to his question. Should I start Pollard or Najee Harris? 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, I think this would have been a no-brainer. Now, I still think it's a no-brainer. I'm starting Pollard, and I'm starting Foreman. The question for me would be Gibson or Harris. That's where I would see a little bit of an issue, but it's Pollard over Harris for me.
Yeah, I think we're just talking about those two players, Quell, man. I'm with Brett. Pollard right now is getting touches. Zeke is coming back probably this week, but I think Tony Pollard in his 2 starts has done enough to show the explosiveness. Once again, he's over 5.5 yards per carry, finds the end zone. So I like what Dallas is doing with Tony Pollard. Don't love the matchup with Minnesota this week, but I still think Tony Pollard over Najee Harris in terms of production. You're seeing Jalen Warren eat into some of that rush share and some of that work down in Pittsburgh, and the offensive line is still not good. But Najee Harris, we've said all offseason, he's a volume play. If he's not getting a lot of the volume, he's not very efficient when he gets the ball. His yards per carry, there's some metrics there that don't look great. So I would start Tony Pollard, but I also agree with Brett that I think your question is, for me, is it Antonio Gibson or Najee Harris?
Yeah, and there's 3. So if he's got to play 3, I'm sitting Gibson out of the group.
Yeah, Brian Robinson, 20-something carries again, only 3.7 yards per carry. We'll get into that game here in a little bit, but he's not been really efficient. But Antonio Gibson did outscore him. I think he finished like wide receiver 9, and Robinson was like wide receiver or running back 11 and RB9. So I think that's a tough one for me, Najee Harris versus Gibson. But I think right now you're probably going to start, if it's me, I'm probably going to start Najee Harris there just because Brian Robinson continues to get so much volume in the run game. Great question, though, man. Love it.
Before we move on, let's talk quickly about Harris. And I was really impressed how he kind of battled back from a lot of Jalen Warren. I didn't like it for my Jalen Warren shares, even though I did see him put up 70 yards combined. And, that's nice. That looks good. But Najee came out. He rushed for 99 yards. He looked a heck of a lot better than he has all year long, whether that means he's getting healthier or whether that means he kind of had a fire lit after hearing all the talk about him possibly having to lose some time to Warren. So
I'll say this, Quail Man, too. Listen to us Saturday morning or Sunday morning at 8:30. It might be at 8 o'clock this Sunday, but jump on at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time or 8:30. We'll post it on Twitter, but we will take a deep dive into every single one of those matchups. And as we get a chance to take that deeper dive throughout the rest of this week, we'll have a better answer for you on Sunday morning as we kind of let things play out and really dive into those matchups. So love the question.
All right. Hey, let's move on. So we just finished up with that game. We both agree that, Buffalo, it's not ideal that they've lost 2 of their last, 2 games. But we think that they're going to be okay down the road. Let's move on. A fun game to watch Monday night. And that's Washington beating the previously undefeated Philadelphia Eagles 32-21. What I really took away from this game was, did we see a blueprint starting to be kind of put together. And that blueprint obviously was Washington came in with one plan and one plan only, and that is to run the hell out of the football. Whether they were efficient or not, they were going to run the ball as much as possible. They ran 49 times for 152 yards. But most impressively was that they controlled the ball 40 minutes and 24 seconds compared to Philadelphia's 19 minutes and 36 seconds. All year long, all we've heard about is Jalen Hurts. We've heard about how Miles Sanders looks a hell of a lot better. We heard about A.J. Brown looking just like he did when he was in Tennessee. And we heard about, the BMI score of Devontae Smith apparently doesn't matter. And we heard about Dallas Goedert. So we've got fantasy stars all over the field. And apparently the way Washington decided to beat them was by making sure that they were on the sidelines.
Yeah, I mean, God, another great game, and you're right. Brian Robinson, 26 carries, 86 yards. He finds the end zone. He played 43 snaps, so 52% snap share. Antonio Gibson was 14 of 44, but he also found the end zone and had 3 catches for 14 yards, 48% snap share. So that's, I think, was the recipe, was to give those guys the football and say, hey, we're going to ride this run game. We're going to set things up. Terry McLaurin finished the week as wide receiver 10, 8 catches, 128 yards. In his 2 games against Philadelphia this year, they played in week 3 and they played just this last week. He's got 20 targets, 14 grabs, and 230 yards against arguably the best corner tandem in the NFL. That's a guy that is not quarterback dependent. And if you target him, he will make plays. So go up and get you the 50-50 ball. But I like what I saw from Washington. But kind of like we talked about with Buffalo, it's hard to go 17-0. Philadelphia Eagles, they only ran 47 plays for 264 yards because Washington controlled the clock. But Jalen Hurts, 175 yards through the air, 2 touchdowns, and runs for another touchdown. We just didn't see 14 carries out of that backfield. That's just not going to get done. That's not Philadelphia football. But you also lose Dallas Goedert, which we're going to talk about. And then you have A.J. Brown, who had an ankle injury, and they say it was the turf. Changed his cleats out, 1 catch for 7 yards, and he played 39 out of 47 snaps, I think it was, on offense. They couldn't get it going with him. So I think Philadelphia is going to be just fine. So no concerns there. But, man, what a great game. As a Cowboys fan, I love seeing Philadelphia lose. Even though that's my team to win the division, I'm okay with it.
No, it was fun. And I think you're right. I would say this. I'm less concerned about Philadelphia than I'm about Buffalo. I feel like at 8-1, I mean, they were bound to – I don't know if they weren't up for the game. I don't know what happened or just one hell of a game plan. Sometimes – when you have that big mark on your back like Philadelphia does with an 8-0, people are up to play you. And I think that's what we saw mostly there.
Yep, I'm with you.
All right, let's move on to one that you probably don't want to talk about. I know my dad in Prescott, Arizona. I don't know how far away you are from there. I will be in Prescott on Sunday visiting my parents, but he was pretty damn happy this week because he's a lifelong Green Bay Packer fan. It was nice for him to be able to see the Packers beat Dallas Cowboys 31-28. And my first thoughts on this, let's be honest. My first thoughts were, thank God Christian Watson may actually turn out to be something because for his price and a lot of rookie drafts last year, I have a lot of Christian Watson shares. And so it was nice to see him have not just a good game, but a hell of a breakout game with 4 receptions for 107 yards and 3 touchdowns. But more importantly, they did a lot what Washington did, and that is they ran the shit out of the ball. They ran 39 times for 207 yards. They were much more efficient than Washington was because they had a 5.3 yards per attempt. It was a pretty good performance by the good old Green Bay Packers, and it was a little disappointing because if you were watching that game, I think the analysts, after Dallas went up 7-0, and they were talking already, they go, if they make it 10-0, I mean, this is going to be the way Green Bay has played this year. The game's pretty much over. Well, the game wasn't over, Coach.
No, it wasn't. I think one of the fundamental things that Dallas did from a defensive standpoint is, with Anthony Barr being out, it put Micah Parsons not being able to play at the, rush the quarterback as often. He had to play more in coverage. I think that affected him a little bit. Not being able to get Aaron Rodgers off his spot and make him throw off platform. And then you also had they played a lot of man coverage, which was a little bit surprising. I think they felt like, hey, this Green Bay receiver group doesn't scare us. We're going to play a little bit more man coverage. And Christian Watson, running over routes and go routes and was able to find ways to get open. He's a tough guy at that speed, at that height to cover when you're running from one hash all the way to the opposite sideline. And that's a tough cover in man coverage. You just saw them take advantage of it. And I think Dallas has to get back to what makes them good and use Michael Parsons DN. If that means somebody else to step up as a linebacker, you got to figure it out. But you got to be able to rush the quarterback, and they just didn't have that this week. So great game, though, man. I love to see it for Christian Watson. We called him out as a sleeper pick 2 weeks ago, and it didn't happen. We picked him again this week. We just felt like he's on the verge of getting something done, and, he got it done this week and paid off for us.
I'll tell you, after watching that performance, I just please Tennessee play man-to-man this week because I want to see much more of that. Before we leave this game, though, it was really nice to see two performers for Dallas, and that was CeeDee Lamb, best game of the year, 11 receptions, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's exactly kind of what we expected out of him early on in his career. Maybe that wasn't realistic, but it's nice to see those type of games starting to happen more often. And then Tony Pollard, once again, 22 carries, 115 yards, and a TD. I think the decision on whether or not Ezekiel Elliott's going to be back next year is becoming easier and easier for them to make each week. Tony Pollard is starting.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the Cowboys, too, is we talked about when Cooper Rush was a quarterback, and my big thing was they need to run the Cooper Rush offense with Dak Prescott. A little bit more explosive, I get it, but when Dak Prescott's throwing the ball 46 times a game, that's not the offense with Dallas that I want to see. And it's not that I don't think Dak can put the team on his shoulders, he can perform. He's had plenty of 400-yard passing games and monster games, but I just think the formula is to get the run game. Even Malik Davis, when he got in for a few carries, looked good. I just felt like they kind of got away in critical situations from the run game and tried to just beat Green Bay in the passing game. And I think you got to recognize when you have a formula that's winning you ball games, you stick with it until a team stops you from doing it. And Green Bay was not stopping Dallas in the run game. They just got away from it in critical moments, and that's a change they've got to make this week.
Well, they better make it this week because we're going to talk about who they play in a little bit later on in the show. Let's move on. One more game that we're going to discuss from last week, and that's Jeff Saturday wins his debut as Indianapolis beats Las Vegas 25-20. A couple things going into the game. Saturday inserts Matt Ryan back into the starting lineup, and you can tell right off the bat his blueprint was to find a way to feed Jonathan Taylor as much as often, and he's rewarded with 147 yards and a touchdown. There was a lot of flack, and I don't know if the flack was – there was a bunch of reasons for the flack. First and foremost, the way Jim Irsay came off in the press conference last week was a little weird, a little cringe-worthy, and kind of wondering what the hell was really going on there, who's running the show there. And then there was a lot of concern about the fact that you just hired a guy who – I don't know what his high school football record was, but it was something like 20-12 or whatever it was. It didn't matter. There was a lot of beef with the fact that you hire a guy with no NFL experience and with a staff that has, guys that have been in the building for a long time. Kind of weird situation, but I'll tell you what, it looks like if you look at the press conference Jeff Saturday had away from Jim Irsay, if you look at the press conference after the game, Jeff Saturday looks like he's a pretty damn good leader of men.
No, look, he called that out in his initial press conference. And I think there's a few things to look at with Jeff Saturday. And the first one I'll hit on is I get the conversations. I know that Bill Cowher made a public message. There's a couple other coaches that spoke out about what about the guys that are there every week, have been there all season long, or sleeping in the office, or they're not going home with their families. What about those guys getting an opportunity? And my first response to that is, hey, look, if that organization felt like there was an assistant coach on that staff that could lead these men for the rest of the season and not completely lose that locker room, which was what's happening with Frank Reich, that they would have made that choice. They didn't feel like they had the guy, the assistant coach in that locker room that could bring. And look, Jeff Saturday, he was a consultant with the team. He played there 13 years. He's played with several Hall of Famers. He's going to be a Hall of Famer himself. The reality is they felt like it was the right call. And what I love is I guarantee you when Jeff Saturday sat down, I would have done it if it was me. I would have said, hey, if I'm going to come out here and I'm going to put my neck on the line to be the head coach, I'm not coming in here to be somebody's scapegoat to get you guys a higher draft pick. I'm going to play Jonathan Taylor, and I'm going to run that guy ragged. And he had 94% of the snaps. Zach Moss at 2%, Wilkins 5%. And I'm going to put Matt Ryan back in because it gives us the best chance to win. And we're going to go play a football game. And I'm going to lead a locker room full of 53 guys. And I think I'm going to get the coaching staff and lean on their experience this season, lean on what they understand about what we're trying to accomplish. And we're going to go out and we're going to win a football game. And you saw at the end, coaches were coming up to him and chest bumping him. And they were having fun with it. They were high-fiving him. those coaches are fine. I think they understand, hey, this is the NFL, and that's a decision that the ownership has a right to make. And whether you agree with it or not, it's hard to knock the move after the first game, isn't it?
And it's hard to knock the move just seeing what the guy. I don't know. I was very impressed with him. I
Yeah.
love his leadership qualities, and I will say this, that in baseball they always talk about most managers come from the catcher position because they have to call the game. They're calling the defense. They're always a part of the game. They're like another manager on the field. And the center, which Jeff Saturday played for a hell of a lot of years in the prime time of Indianapolis Colts football. And, I mean, it just seems like a natural fit. And, we'll see where it goes from here on out.
Yep.
We're going to move on. Let's move on to the least favorite part of our show, which always seems to have a lot of guys that affect a lot of fantasy managers and a lot of NFL teams. And we're going to get right into our injury report. First one is the one that hurts the most. We've already seen guys like Trey Lance. We've seen Breece Hall. And now we get Cooper Kupp. He goes on IR, and he's going to miss at least the next 4 weeks. He had surgery yesterday with the hopes that the recovery time from a high ankle sprain may not take as long. You look what he's done already on this year, 75 receptions, 812 yards, 6 touchdowns. I'll tell you, there's not a lot of options to look for on that Rams offense without Cooper Kupp.
No, I tell you what, who would have thought we'd be talking about a Sean McVay offense and feeling like there isn't anybody in this offense that's startable on a week-to-week basis now with what's going on with Matthew Stafford having a tough season and now with Cooper Kupp out. Allen Robinson's not a guy you can move to the slot and he's going to give you anywhere near the production Cooper Kupp does. Ben Skoranek is a great story. He can fill in from time to time. He can give you some receptions. He can be that possession-type receiver. Van Jefferson coming off the injury, still trying to figure it out. Brandon Powell, Tutu Atwell. There's just not anybody in that offense outside of Tyler Higbee because of the lack of production at the tight end position this year, which is, I feel like, is unprecedented. It seems like the production from week to week has been so bad this year at the tight end position. You don't have one of those top guys. I think it's Tyler Higbee's season. I think that's the guy they're going to lean on. They're going to try to utilize him as much as they can, and you're going to try to figure it out. They don't have a run game they can rely on. It doesn't set up the play action that the Bay offense tries to utilize. There's nobody in that backfield that's getting it done. So it's a tough loss for them. They're 3-6. You're in a difficult division. I think you sit out your 4 games. You see where the record's at. And look, we're not going to rush Cooper Kupp back. It doesn't make sense as a franchise wide receiver. And there's no point in getting him in late in the season if he doesn't have to, unless, of course, Cooper Kupp wants to. And if he does, you're going to let the guy play. But, yeah, that's a tough loss for the Rams.
It is. And it's a tough loss for a hell of a lot of fantasy managers.
Yeah.
Real quick, I don't know the guy. I don't follow him. But to see everybody retweet that fantasy football counselor or whatever his name is, and him victory lapping or whatever you want to call it, Cooper Kupp is not going to be the wide receiver 1 just like I predicted. That, to me, that's just such poor taste. I don't know.
First of all, how hard is it? I was going to say I agree with you 100%. First of all, how many times do you have a wide receiver 1 in back-to-back seasons anyway? It's not something that happens very often. If he just said he's not going to finish in the top 12 as a wide receiver 1, that's a little bit more of a hot take. To say he's not going to be the wide receiver 1, right? And now he's hurt. He was in contention for it. Now he gets hurt and you victory lap it and you make it sound like you called it and you're the greatest. Yeah. I hate to even give that guy any airtime. It was such a terrible, terrible take. And it's just not something that should even be in this space at all. Victory lapping somebody's injury is ridiculous.
Right. They're actual human beings for crying out loud. All right, hey, let's move on. And that's a tough one for the Arizona Cardinals. That Zach Ertz is going to be out for the year after suffering an injury in Sunday's win. I'll tell you, that Arizona offense over the last few years has not really utilized the tight end position much. When Ertz came in, he's been a viable starter in fantasy football, but he's out, which brings us to the next part of the deal, and that's who's going to replace him. And that is the guy's name is Trey McBride out of Colorado State, 2nd-round pick, first tight end pick in the 2022 draft. I know you and I both loved his athletic profile and his production at Colorado State. Do you think there's any chance he's going to be able to do anything here on out for the Cardinals?
Well, I think that's and I loved him coming out. I picked him up in every rookie draft that I could because I felt like potentially it's tough for rookie tight ends to be productive at the NFL level in the first place. When you're coming to an organization that has Zach Ertz, it's going to be even more difficult. But the guy's played 204 snaps this year. He has 4 targets. That's a 1.9% target per snap. Now, granted, that's not route participation, but they have not targeted, and 3 of those targets were in week 3. So he's had 1 target in the last several games. He had 1 last week, and he caught it for 7 yards. His catch rate's 100%. He's been targeted 4 times. That's 4 grabs for, 33 yards. So I guess there's that. But there's nothing if you've watched the film on the Cardinals, if you studied the Cardinals offense, if you know the history of Cliff Kingsbury, he's never really utilized the tight end until Zach Ertz. And now you're going to get Marquise Brown back. You have, obviously D-Hop and what he's done since he's been back. Looks like he hasn't missed a beat after a 6-game suspension. You have Rondale Moore, who's been a must start for the last, couple weeks, if not 3 weeks. I don't see where there's any opportunity for Trey McBride to be relevant, why this offense wouldn't go more and say, hey, look, we're going to go 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. We're going to spread you out. We're going to use James Conner in the run game. We're going to use Kyler Murray's ability to move the pocket, and we're going to try to throw games to victory. And until he does something, I love him as a stash. I think his career is he's going to have a solid career, but there's nothing this season and about the history of the Cliff Kingsbury offense that makes me feel comfortable playing Trey McBride right now.
No, but I agree where you talk about the stash, because it seems like all my Twitter leagues or my sleeper leagues, whatever you want to call them, they kind of seem to be both.
Yeah.
But they all have like 32-man rosters. But in my home leagues, we're looking at 20-man rosters. In both of my 2 home leagues, I picked them up, or I hope I do. We should find out any minute. But we put in bids today on free agents, and I'm going to take a flyer on him. I feel like, again, with his draft capital, with the fact that Zach is older and he's going to be coming off of a knee injury. I mean, he's a good, like you said, he's a great stash to have. Before we move on to the next injury, it wasn't an injury, but it was kind of shocking yesterday that Eno Benjamin was cut. Obviously they feel a hell of a lot more comfortable about James Conner and his health. They feel pretty comfortable. I would think that Darrell Williams is going to be back soon, and they feel real comfortable about Keontae Ingram and his development. Keontae Ingram is a guy who played at USC last year, transferred from Texas with Bijan Robinson, and we'll talk about Bijan here in a few minutes, but transferred from Texas when Bijan Robinson started to kind of tear it up. We talk about another stash. If he's not on a roster, I'd definitely pick up Keontae Ingram.
Yeah, I'm picking up Keontae Ingram. I did draft him in a couple deep rookie drafts. So I think 5-round rookie drafts. They'll get him late 4th, early 5th round. I think there's an opportunity there. We've seen what they've done with David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert in terms of the split there, in terms of the snap share. There's going to be an opportunity for Treston Ebner to get some carries in this offense. I think it makes sense.
You just went from Keontae Ingram to –
I did, because I was reading my notes. I went from Keontae Ingram to Treston Ebner because I was reading my notes. But I think
usually I have a few beers before a show, so I was wondering if those few were actually a hell of a lot more, because I was real lost. So yes, we will get to Khalil Herbert and Treston Ebner here in a few minutes, but definitely we love the opportunity that Ingram. We always talk about a path to an opportunity. Well, he's got more of a path than he did 2 days ago. He'd be someone that I would stash if he's not already picked up by somebody. Let's move on to the next injury. Jerry Jeudy left Sunday's game on a cart with that god-awful ankle injury that seems to happen every week with everybody. However, there is optimism that he's going to play this week against Vegas. My first thoughts are, I'm glad he's going to be back, but if I don't have to play him, and in some rosters that I do, I'm okay not playing him, because until that offense is figured out in Denver, it just hasn't been a viable option in the passing game, whether it be Sutton. Albert O has been nothing. The only guy that people are excited about is the tight end out of UCLA. So hope he gets back, just for his sake and for a lot of people that have to play him. And we hate injuries, but not much more news other than that. Moving on to one that kind of does hurt me, and I know it hurts you, and I'm sure it hurts a lot of zero running back guys, and that's Khalil Herbert leaves the game Sunday with a hip injury, and he's placed on IR for at least the next 4 weeks. As a dual threat with David Montgomery, he's rushed for 643 yards this year. That one hurt. That one is, and a lot of people have talked about this is his offense going forward after the
Yep.
22 season. Not sure if that's going to be the case, but the reality of it is that even in his dual split role, he had a hell of a lot of value this year, and he was a must start for me in at least 4 or 5 different leagues.
No, he's proven himself, right? He's seen the snap share. He's getting the split with David Montgomery, and it's huge, man. I'm a big Khalil Herbert guy. He was showing production. We had the David Montgomery contract, and where they're going to go this offseason there. It's devastating. I think Khalil Herbert. It sucks to get guys going to miss some games, but there's an opportunity. I just hit on it. We were talking about Keontae Ingram, so I won't. I went into trusting Ebner a little bit, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity for a guy to step up and to be part of what the Bears are doing. There's going to be some opportunities for him. But yeah, I hate this for Khalil Herbert, man. And hey, this is another year. David Montgomery, he's done in the past where late in the season he catches fire and he wins you some fantasy leagues. So, if you got David Montgomery, you can certainly fire him up now.
Yeah, if you're a contender and if you can get him cheap, man, go get him because you're absolutely right. And who knows what they have in Ebner. And that's the great thing in rookie drafts for me is that early on in drafts, I want to hit the prime. I want to hit the best player available. Late in drafts, those are my dart throws and dart throws with running backs because you never know what a sixth round running back like Ebner can do when he finally gets an opportunity. So, and if he does hit gold, it cost you a 4th round pick in a rookie draft, or better yet, it cost you fab money 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks into the season. So I'm interested to see what type of role he will have. Let's move on to the next one. And this one really hurts the Kansas City offense, and that's because Juju Smith-Schuster has really, there was a lot of concern that maybe with his low dot the last few years and his inability to really perform in that Pittsburgh offense, but he's gone in there and he has definitely taken the role as the wide receiver one. Suffers a big hit. A lot of people weren't very happy with the hit. Yeah, monster hit. And he's in concussion protocol, and as of today, he was still in concussion protocol. So not sure where he's going to be come Sunday.
Yeah, and I think they took it easy with McCole Hardman this week, and they're like, hey, if you're not healthy, that's not, we've got MVS, we've got Sky Moore, we've got, Kadarius Toney who shined this week, and so we've got the depth at that position that we don't have to force McCole Hardman into playing. So I think you're going to get him back this week. It looks like Juju Smith-Schuster, if he can get through concussion protocol, hopefully will be available this week. But Kansas City offense is rolling right now, and I love what Juju Smith is doing. A little bit of a slower start, I think, this year than what we were hoping for. I certainly had him as the wide receiver one in that offense, and he was brought over from Pittsburgh. I think there's a lot of opportunity there for him the rest of the season. So this offense continues to roll. So tough loss if he is out this week. At the same time, look, it's concussion. If he misses a week, he'll be back in 2 weeks, and that offense will continue to roll. So not huge news, but certainly worth noting for sure.
Before we move on, let's stick with the Kansas City offense. And that is, I'd love to find out what exactly happened with Kadarius Toney in New York. Because if any team needed a receiver in that offense, it's the New York Giants. They have a guy named David Stills, who is a former big-time recruit at the quarterback position, playing wide receiver. They have Darius Slayton, a former 6th-round pick, who I'll tell you this, he's played a lot better the last few weeks.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is that if anyone needed a playmaker like we saw last week for the Kansas City offense, Kadarius Toney should still be in New York. I'd love to find out down the road what exactly happened. Where did the issues? What happened there? There didn't seem to be much trust either with Kadarius with the organization or the organization with Kadarius. Love to figure out what exactly happened down the road. Let's move on to the next one. Yep. This one is another big one. Dallas Goedert on what looked to be a face mask penalty, should have been, wasn't called. But he suffers a shoulder injury on that play. And all we know for now is that he's going to be out for multiple weeks. I've seen a lot of you and I both read a shitload of content. Yeah. And I read, Dallas Goedert is essentially the tight end 3. I mean, you look at Travis Kelce, you look at Mark Andrews, who's behind them? It's got to be Goddard, and this one hurts a lot of fantasy managers, and it also hurts Philadelphia taking one of their best playmakers out of the game.
Yeah, it's a tough loss, and now you've got a guy like Jake Stoll, right, who's going to have to figure out a way to step up, and he certainly doesn't give you the production that Dallas Goedert would give you in the passing game. I think you're seeing more as an inline blocker in this offense, and I think you're going to see them go more 3 receiver sets. We're going to use Quez Watkins. You're going to use Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, and they're still going to pound the rock. They're still going to use, Miles Sanders and Boston Scott and that 3-headed monster in the backfield. But it's a really tough loss, especially for a team right now that's got a really, really good roster. So you now have got to figure out how are you going to get through these games without Dallas Goedert. And I think you're going to see Devontae Smith get an opportunity to be a little bit more involved. I mean, he's kind of hit boom or bust, and teams that play a lot of zone coverage, he tends to thrive against. Man coverage, he tends to struggle a little bit more. But they've got to find a way to create free releases for him, whether that's through motion, whether that's through condensed formations. But I'm looking forward to seeing what that Philadelphia offense looks like now without Dallas Goedert moving forward.
Let's move on to another tight end that got hurt, Gerald Everett, who's been a pretty damn good freaking producer for the Chargers offense and for a lot of fantasy managers. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that you've had Michael Williams out, you've had Keenan Allen out, but more importantly, he's just played well. He left Sunday's game with a groin injury in the loss to San Francisco, and he's considered day-to-day with a chance to play Sunday. That's something that we'll hit upon on Sunday, and we'll obviously know a lot more. But if he can't play, that both hurts the Chargers, who have very little playmakers at the receiver spot or guys who catch the ball. And him not being in would be a big blow to both him and managers in fantasy football.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a team that I can think of off the top of my head that's been decimated more by injuries in the last few years. You lose Rashawn Slater at left tackle, who's a very promising, left tackle. You lose Bosa for a little bit. You lose. I mean, they just continue to have injury after injury. It's like every single week that there's something that just hits that team. And now you've got Gerald Everett out. You got Trey McKitty and Richard Rodgers, right? And we hit on it. You got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams that have been suffering injuries. They've missed some time. And so it's this offense is going to have to figure out a way to move the football. Austin Eckler right now is the one guy that you can rely on week to week to get volume and to get touches and produce, especially in PPR formats. But that's a tough loss for Gerald Everett if you can't go. But look, there's a chance for him to play this Sunday. Let's hope he's ready to go. And if not, it's probably 1 week he misses and he's probably ready to go. But that team can't afford to lose any more games.
No, they don't. At 5-4 in a tough division, the leader is 7-2, and the AFC is pretty strong up and top anyway. So yeah, you can't afford to lose too many more times if you're the Chargers. Let's move on to the last injury of the week. Leonard Fournette left Sunday's game with a hip injury. They're on bye this week, so you probably don't have to worry about him missing games, but you might have to worry about the fact that he may now be the number 2 back in Tampa Bay. Your guy, Arizona State's Rachaad White, came in, rushed for 105 yards and 22 carries. Didn't have any receptions, but he certainly looks like he's going to fit the role very nicely for Tampa Bay.
Hey, 22 for 105, right? He's got 60 for 222 on the season, only 3.7 yards per attempt. I said this in the offseason. He was had him graded high as a prospect. A lot of people talked about his age coming out from ASU. Spent a couple of years in junior college and then had a few years at ASU. I think it was 5 years total from high school to the NFL. And, the age apex for running backs a lot younger than any other skill position. But Rachaad White was having an unbelievable game or season when COVID cut their season short to only 4 games that year. For 6 games, he had like 40 carries for 400 yards. He was legit at averaging 10 yards per carry in those games, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield. So you could argue his 4th year would have been his breakout year, but because of COVID, he came back to ASU for another year, dominated that year, and then went on to the NFL and was able to get drafted in a spot that made some sense. But I love Rachaad White. I love his skill set. I love what I think he can bring to this offense. So I hope they continue to use him more and more. His snap shares were already kind of coming up. Leonard Fournette, getting knocked out of the game, was able to be the 1A. And I think you're seeing what happened with Zeke and Tony Pollard. Now you're seeing Rachaad White kind of be that guy that's more explosive. An offense looks a little bit cleaner, a little more explosive when he's in the game. So looking forward to seeing him rest of the season.
All right, we're finally done with my least favorite part of the show, and that's talking about injuries. So let's move on. Week 11, we're just going to highlight a couple quick games, not get much into it because we spend so much time on that at Sunday mornings. We will be live this Sunday. We will go a half an hour early. I'm on the road. I'll be like you. I'll be doing it from a hotel, but we'll be live and we'll go into each one of them. But just as far as excitability and can't wait to just sit in front of TV and watch it, Minnesota Vikings 8-1, Dallas Cowboys 6-3. Quick thoughts. As a Cowboy fan, you're coming off a loss. How do you feel about this one?
So I'll touch on the Cowboy side. You can touch on the Minnesota side, right? So I have a little fun with this one. But so with the Cowboys, the big thing is you got to be able to stop the run. This is the Achilles heel for this defense in big games. They're 29th in rush defense. When they played the Rams in the playoffs a few years ago, they got absolutely ran out of the stadium. They played San Francisco last year, they got ran out of the stadium. This team played against Philadelphia this year, they got ran out of the stadium. They struggle against teams that can line up, run between the tackles. They struggle, and this is an opportunity now. This week you face Dalvin Cook, so you've got to figure out how to stop the run. Now you get Zeke back probably this week. What is that Zeke Pollard split going to look like? Are they going to continue to lean on Tony Pollard as the 1A in that offense, which I think they should? He needs to get his 14 to 16 carries per game and 3 or 4 touches in the passing game. Whatever else is left over for Zeke, to make it happen. But Dak Prescott, 4 picks in 4 games played this season, 3 in the last 2 games. You could look at – I broke the film down on this on Twitter on a couple of them. Somebody posted the film on it, and I kind of went through it and gave a little deeper dive on my perspective there. And you can make an argument on the first pick that CeeDee Lamb did not run the correct route. He didn't make the proper, post-snap adjustment on his route. He ran a post route when he should have ran a dig. He should have squared that off. If they cap it, snap it, meaning if there's a safety over the top where you're trying to go and he's got your route side space on the post, you're supposed to cut that off and turn that into more of an in-cutting route. He didn't do that, so the ball was picked. It was thrown on time. It was thrown in the right spot. It was the right throw. Unfortunately, that's on CeeDee Lamb. The second interception, you can make an argument, was on Dalton Schultz. He was supposed to take the safety on a post route, and Lamb had to dig right behind it. They kind of ran into each other, and but if you look at it, it's a throw that Dak should have never made. So I still put the second one on Dak, even though that throw, you can make an argument, the route combination between Schultz and Lamb was not correct. But I think it's a game. Look, Dallas has got to get right. The Vikings are 5th in the league in interceptions with 10, and Dak's coming off, a game, the last 2 games where he's throwing 3 picks. So it's going to come down to, can they run the football and can Dak protect the football? So
it's funny you bring up Minnesota's defense and you bring up their 5 interceptions. They've been very opportunistic, but giving up yards, they're giving up. I mean, they're one of the worst defenses as far as giving up yards on the season. They've given up 3,400 yards. They give up 381 yards passing in a game. They give up 118 yards rushing. So it's been a struggle for them defensively, yet they're seemingly finding ways to take the ball away from the opposing team. So I'm really curious to see, when I just look at the matchup, this is a game, obviously you've got great fantasy players on both sides of the ball. And then you've got 2 defenses that over the last couple games haven't. Now, Dallas's strength this season has been by far their defense for most of the season. But I wouldn't be surprised to see this a high-scoring game.
I think it's going to be too. I mean, you're playing on turf, you're playing in an indoor stadium. It's when these 2 teams get together, it's usually a pretty explosive game. I don't expect this to be any different. So, Kirk Cousins and Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, that's a scary trio right there.
Yep. All right. Hey, let's move on to the next one. We're going to do this one. Probably spend a little less time on it because we've already talked about the Chargers and Kansas City quite a bit, but they face off. Chargers 5-4, Kansas City 7-2. With all these injuries, even if it is a must win, and it certainly is at this point of the year, it is a must win for the Chargers. I just don't see it happening for them this week. I like Kansas City.
Yeah, I think this is a blowout. I hate to say it, my future son-in-law, I'm not afraid to go ahead and say that. Maybe he's the one guy listening right now, but Kansas City Chiefs right now to me are explosive. I think their offense right now is humming. I think Patrick Mahomes is playing at an MVP level. They're starting to figure that out. They're starting to get Isaiah Pacheco more touches. CEH is kind of non-existent at this point. Jet McKinnon's taking over the passing game work. And the Chargers, they're so beat up on both sides of the ball. I just think this is one of those games that Kansas City is going to run all over the Chargers. I don't mean run on the ground. I mean they're going to dominate and steamroll the Chargers. This is the one game. The spread's got to be in double digits for this game. This is the one normally of a betting guy you would take the under when there's a big spread against 2 teams that on paper should match up okay. But the Chargers are playing so bad right now, and Kansas City's playing so well that this is that game. I'm okay taking the points in Kansas City. Whatever the points are, I'm taking them.
Should be. I mean, anytime you get to see Patrick Mahomes in that offense play, I'm excited about to see Kadarius Toney. A lot of people were wondering. In fact, I saw a lot of people. I saw a tweet today. Is Christian Watson a one-game wonder? Well, I'm kind of wondering if Kadarius Toney is going to keep this up, because if he does, holy smokes, that was one hell of a steal that they got in that trade. Hey, let's move on. And this is one of my – if you're sitting here and you're like me in my home league, and in my home league currently right now, I'm 1-9, which sucks, but it's been a rebuild, and it's been a time where I've been able to accumulate 5 first-round picks over the next 2 years. But this is the time, if you're in a rebuild and you're struggling, you got to start looking at the 2000 or the next draft, and the next draft is 2023. I don't know about you, Coach, but for the last 2 or 3 years, all we've heard about is how great this class is going to be. You got guys from top to bottom, whether they be quarterback, whether they be running back, or whether they be wide receiver. This is a draft class that people have been hyping for years.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into a little bit. I think there's a lot of talent coming out. I think the 2024 class, which we'll get into, later on, but I think the 2023 class is one of the strongest classes we've seen from top to bottom on both sides of the football. So it's going to be exciting. And of course, the guy we're going to talk about at the 1.01, in my opinion, in any startup drafts next year for fantasy football, dynasty redraft, and rookie draft is going to be your 1.01. That's Bijan Robinson. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, you saw him play in high school, you being an Arizona guy, but Bijan Robinson's been talked about forever. I mean, this is a guy that there are people right now, even with Jonathan Taylor, that say he is the dynasty RB1 right now. It's weird because to me, he's so good catching the ball out of the backfield. He's going to give you such upside with what he does in the receiving game. And what we're looking at, if you guys don't know, Dynasty Nerds is one of the top dynasty, if you call them keeper league, whatever you call them. But I'll tell you what, I used to be a editor for those guys, Dennis Bennett and all the whole team over there. They do a hell of a job. So we're just taking a look at their latest Superflex mock draft. And now 101, as Coach said, Bijan Robinson. He's 6 foot, 220. Probably the most hyped running back since Saquon Barkley. He's everything you want in a running back, and I'm doing everything in my power to acquire him as much as possible.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And again, I coached at the high school level out here at Liberty High School. Shout out again to Liberty High School, top 15 in the country, and they start their playoffs this week. But yeah, Bijan Robinson played in the state championship game right before we did. So when they played the state championship games at ASU, and Bijan Robinson, who's at South Point Catholic, at the game before ours, got a chance to watch him the second half of that game as we were prepping, and I've seen him play up close, and he is absolutely 6 foot, 220. He's built like the consummate bell cow. He's got great ability in the receiving game. You touched on it already. He's extremely good at the point of contact. He's extremely elusive. Some of his jump cuts and his ability to shake in a phone booth. I don't care if it's between the tackles, if it's outside. I don't care if it's gap scheme, zone scheme. I don't care what the scheme is that you're trying to run offensively. He's going to fit into. He's going to be a first-round draft pick, which doesn't happen a lot at the running back position. I think he's going to go earlier in the draft than what we've typically seen. I think he's the best prospect since Saquon Barkley. That's including Jonathan Taylor, and they touch on that in their article, and I agree with them 100%. I think Bijan Robinson is that dude, and wherever he goes, he's a starter day one.
All right, hey, since this is a Superflex mock draft we're looking at, it's not a surprise that the new number 2 pick in the Dynasty Nerd article is Bryce Young, quarterback. I should say it's not a surprise that it's a quarterback because a lot of people I've seen have CJ Stroud there. But regardless, You're looking at 2 quarterbacks, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud. They give you look at what Bryce Young's ability to make plays with his legs, and not so much to take off and run, but more with just extending plays. You saw a play a couple weeks ago in their game with LSU. It's fun to watch. And my only concern with him is they talk about him being 6 foot, 194 pounds. Can he stand up to the NFL game, and can he avoid the injury with that type of size?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you took the words right out of my mouth. If it's me at the 1.02, and again, Bijan Robinson to me is your 1.01 in Superflex drafts. But if I'm going quarterback at 2, to me it is CJ Stroud over Bryce Young. I get the mobility of Bryce Young, I get it, but the 6 foot 194 to me is concerning at the NFL level. Does that mean he's not going to be productive? No, it doesn't. I think the guy's extremely good at understanding progressions, understanding how to navigate the pocket. He can make every throw. He's a leader in the locker room. So I love the Bryce Young makeup, but I feel like CJ Stroud is coming from an Ohio State pro-style offense, and I can't downplay that enough. Alabama, same thing. I get it. But the size of CJ Stroud and what he can do, I think I think it's unparalleled. I really do. I think CJ Stroud is that dude that can make every single throw. I think he's going to be he's an elite passer. I think he's going to come in. He's going to make a splash, whatever team he lands in, in his rookie season. I would take C.J. Stroud over Bryce Young personally, but I get why people take Bryce Young. I think people fall in love with Alabama. You got to understand, here's the other part of it for me. Alabama, year in, year out, puts guys in the NFL on the offensive line, right? You have such great protection in Alabama year in and year out. Yes, you get that at Ohio State too, but Alabama's a different level, in my opinion. But I think that C.J. Stroud, to me, is that guy at the 1.02 over Bryce Young.
I agree, but we're kind of, apples to oranges, I guess. But,
yeah.
but we're okay with either one of those two guys. We think that they're going to be a hell of a lot of freaking fun to watch when they get to the NFL level. Talk about a guy that – well, let's get to this question real quick.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's get to Jackson.
Yeah, Jackson, appreciate the question. We always want to put these at the forefront. We'll talk our freaking rookies in a little bit, and that's Kadarius Toney or George Pickens. For me, I've seen more from Pickens, and it's an easy choice. I'm going Pickens. Not to say I wouldn't – if someone told me Toney or Sunday night we look at it and Toney puts another game up like that, good for him. But I'm still going with George Pickens.
Yeah, so this is where we're going to be a little bit. I'm going to play devil's advocate. I think you're right, but I in terms of we've seen George Pickens do it. But you're looking at Kadarius Toney in a Kansas City offense that's throwing for 380 yards a game over the last few games. Patrick Mahomes is absolute money right now. I feel like based on passing volume, and look, it's an even easier decision for me if McCole Hardman's going to miss another week or if Juju Smith-Schuster's out with a concussion. You put Kadarius Toney into that second possible option after Travis Kelce in that passing offense. And I think Andy Reid, if anybody can scheme a wide receiver, you saw what he did with Tyreek Hill, and I'm not saying Kadarius Toney's Tyreek Hill, let's slow it down, but how he can utilize wide receivers in this offense. If I'm swinging in a must-win situation, I'm swinging upside, I'm swinging home run here, and I'm going Kadarius Toney over George Pickens. But I get why someone would take Pickens.
I'll tell you what, Jackson, we'll address this again on Sunday when we have.
We will.
When we know if Schuster's out or we know if McColl's out. But
if they're both playing, it's George Pickens. But yeah, if either one of those guys are out, I still think Kadarius Toney is a guy that's going to pop again this week.
Appreciate the question, Jackson. All right, hey, let's move on. And this guy's probably my favorite guy. And not because I don't think Bijan Robinson's my favorite guy in the draft. But yeah. Jahmyr Gibbs, former guy from Georgia Tech, played. I mean, he had an incredible, and when I say incredible, his stats as a freshman, I think he had 600 yards or somewhere around there. But his playmaking ability just flashed over and over again. Then after his sophomore year, he transfers to Alabama. And right off the bat, you've seen what he's been able to do with these guys. Dynasty Nerds has him at the 104. They talk about him being possibly even the 1B running back. And I agree. A lot of comparisons to Kamara because he's such a smooth runner. He has an incredible ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, which is why I really like both these backs. When you talk about both these backs being Robinson and Gibbs, when you talk about at the NFL level, if you can have a guy who does not lead the field on third down and doesn't only lead the field, but produces in the passing game with not just his ability to block, but make the plays out of the backfield, man, I'm all over it. This is a guy, man, I'll be honest with you. I'm sitting in a league right now where I have the 101 because I'm not very good. And much like you, I made it a trade and I got the 102 or what looks like it's going to be the 102. It's going to be hard for me not to go Bijan Jahmyr.
Hey, look, last year, who was it, right? At the 1.01 or 1.02, I took two running backs back to back, and
but the quarterback class isn't the same, but yes, I agree. You can do that.
But this is a year, and again, it depends. Like some super flex leagues, you've already got 3 or 4 quarterbacks that you like, so maybe you don't have to go quarterback early. You can trade back or whatever. It all depends on what your current roster structure is. But I think with Gibbs, what I love is vision. I mean, if you look at what he does and how he sets up the second level, it's like he's playing chess when you're playing checkers, right? It's one thing to understand, what the zone scheme is. He's a great zone scheme runner, but at the same time, you see him set guys up at the second level as he's getting through that first level. As he's getting through the D line, he's setting up those backers at the second level. I love his vision. I love his big playability. I love his contact balance. I think Jahmyr Gibbs is a great if Bijan Robinson wasn't in this class, right? He's by far the clear-cut running back that you're taking at 1.01 if you're going to go running back first. But I think it's that close, but unfortunately, Bijan Robinson's just, he's just that dude. But I think Gibbs is going to have one hell of an NFL career. He's a 3-down back.
Yeah, there are so many times we talked about you've been a redraft guy forever. I've always been a dynasty guy forever. And there were a lot of times where I'm looking at it, and I've always been a one quarterback guy. So if this is a one quarterback league draft, we've got Bijan 1, Jamar 2. And that's usually the situations that I was looking at because it was always one quarterback for me prior to the last couple of years. But with that being said, when there was a decision to make, like a Bijan or a Jamar, sometimes it was better to have the 102 because I didn't want to second guess myself forever, and they made the decision for me.
Yeah.
This kind of like this one and this one for me because, god dang, I really like Gibbs. All right, hey, let's move on to the first wide receiver, and this is the guy, Jackson. Please, you want to try this? I think it's Jackson Smith Najabi. That's what we're going to go with. 6 foot, 198, junior out of Ohio State. Despite the fact that 2 guys got drafted drafted into the NFL of Ohio State last year, Najabi was the number 1 receiver for them last year. He is as gifted of a route runner and as gifted athletically. He's been incredible his time there. Unfortunately, he suffered a hamstring injury and he's just not been on the field much this year. But incredible talent, and I would have no reservations in drafting Jackson Smith Najabi.
No, he's got a great skill set. You know me, I'm a wide receiver guy. I love watching film on these guys, but I dive a lot more into the film as we get closer to the April draft and my prospect tool comes out. But I think he's got great upside. I think he's got the ability, and you hit on it. There's been some receivers that have come through that university that are very well polished and have made some splash at the NFL level. And think about it: if he was the guy over the last 3 years at Ohio State, if he was a clear number 1, those guys were not there. What type of numbers this guy would have put up? And I think that's what you have to understand: the depth of some of these top elite Division I programs that just put skill players at the NFL level every single year. And I love his skill set, man. I think he's a polished route runner. I think he's a guy that can play. He can get off. He's got a great toolbox, release moves. So I'm excited to see what he does at the next level. I mean, 6 foot 198. He's a compact guy. He's tough. He's tough at contact, man. He's a tough runner in the open field too. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does.
Me too. But let's move on to the next one. 106 for this super. Let's say that again. Super flex, because I've seen a lot of people have this guy actually as the number 1 quarterback coming to the draft. A lot of, guys that are well respected in the NFL scouting industry. And that's Will Levis, 6'3", 231-pound quarterback out of Kentucky. I don't like this pick. I certainly hope I don't need a quarterback at 106 because I wouldn't take him here. But
I wouldn't either.
In super flex, I get it. Quarterbacks are freaking the most valuable spot. But I definitely need to do more research and actually have my own eyes on him before I would make that type of pick.
Yeah, and I think this again comes down to your roster construction, right? Your ability to make trades, how many picks you have, and there's so many factors. But I think there's a massive drop off, in my opinion, between the top 2 quarterbacks in this draft, and then you get down to Will Levis. I feel like he hasn't done enough this year to jump off the screen, and I'm gonna dive into that film a lot more in the offseason. But I don't see it. Like, I don't fall in love with Will Levis. I know Christian Williams over at Debbie Royale, who I think does a phenomenal job with their prospect model, what they're doing over at Debbie Royale. I know he's not a big fan of Will Levis either. So to me, if I have the 1.06 in this draft, I'm not taking the 3rd quarterback. But again, if you have Jared Goff, who's probably not going to be your starter next year in Detroit, if you have the Baker Mayfields, you have these guys that are not going to be starters possibly next year, then you probably are you in a tough spot. I'd rather trade somebody to get one of their quarterbacks, depending on who it is, than have to make this pick. I think that 1.06 in Superflex draft is a little bit high, but again, depends on your roster. Depends on
it does. For me, when it comes to rookie drafts, it never depends on my roster. And maybe that's where I go wrong, but I'm always a value guy. I'm picking best player available in every draft that I do. And if that's the case at 106, it's not going to be Will Levis. Let's move on to 107. Let's move on to 107, another running back. To see as old school 1 quarterback guys, man, running backs were king in fantasy football. So I love to see the 3rd running back off the board. That's Sean Tucker, running back, 5'10", 205 pounds, out of Syracuse. In the Dynasty Nerds article, they talk about he makes a jaw-dropping play almost every play. He's got great patience, great vision. I don't know if you've seen him play. I have seen him. I like him a lot. I'll tell you, if I can find a way, I have a couple leagues where I have 4 first-round picks. If my 3rd or 4th first-round pick in those leagues becomes Sean Tucker, I'll be pretty damn happy. I really like him.
Yeah, this goes back to my point earlier. Like, I'm taking Sean Tucker before I take the Will Levis. So I have watched Syracuse play twice this year, but I also pay a lot of attention to Devin Royale, some of the content those guys put out. There's a lot of guys have got a chat room on Twitter that's nothing but college and NFL scouts and film gurus. And so a lot of those guys will share clips, and we get a chance to break some of that film down in that group setting. So, and I know Sean Tucker's a guy a lot of those guys are really high on. They love his contact balance. They love his vision. I think you hit on it. He's a home run type guy. So, okay, I'm taking Sean Tucker before I'm taking Will Levis because, again, to your point, if you're taking talent over, you're not considering roster. To me, Sean Tucker's the guy, and I'm very happy if I get Sean Tucker as a 3rd running back off the board in this draft to add to my dynasty team.
Absolutely. Move on. Another position, another pick that I'm not too fond of, and that's 108, Hendon Hooker. Now, granted, he's been great for Tennessee. 6'4", 218 pounds, former, transfer from Virginia Tech. Pretty old. I want to say he's like 23, 24, which seems to always be a concern when you look at prospects. But he's performed well. He's got great athletic ability. Just not sure about taking him this early in a draft.
Yeah, the next guy that's on the list is the guy that I would take above him too. Again, there's a big drop off to me after you get the first 2 quarterbacks with that we talked about earlier I can't remember who it was, 1.02. Where'd they go in this draft? 1.02 and 1.0 or 1.03, 1.04.
Running backs 101 and 104.
Yeah, so I don't love the pick either. I mean, and I get it. He struggled. He had some success early in his career at Virginia Tech. He transfers into Tennessee. They've got a great roster. You can see how they have played this year over at Tennessee. So I think you got a good situation and a good offense that fits his skill set. I think he's more of a prospect at this point, a prospect at this point that's got a lot of things he's got to work on. I think there's a lot of things you got to coach up with him to get the NFL level and be successful there. I'm not real high on him either. I would rather take the guy we're going to talk about next in the draft, who I think is a little bit low in this draft, but I get it. Super flex. There's so much love at the quarterback position, but we've seen where guys reach for quarterbacks in super flex and it has not worked out. So I'm not a firm believer in. I'll make a trade. I'll figure something else out. I've drafted 2 quarterbacks on super flex. I'll figure out a position player on the bye week. I've had some success with that if those quarterbacks can stay healthy. I don't feel like I'm forced to take a quarterback just because of super flex.
But let's go on to the guy that you are excited about. That's the guy at 109, Jordan Addison, wide receiver, USC, 6 foot, 174, was the Fred Biletnikoff winner out of Pittsburgh last year. When all this talk of, when college players could get paid, which seems to be the case now, he makes the move to USC, and he's been nothing short of great. I love his route running ability, his playmaking ability, and, man, the softest hands I think that there are in the draft.
Yeah, he's got great hands. And he attacks the football. I think with Jordan Addison, I love his skill set, but this is like a Devontae Smith type feel, right? 6 foot, 174, can take the contact to the next level. We've seen Devontae Smith have some splash games, but we've also seen him struggle against man coverage. At the NFL level, he's more of a zone beater, and I think you see a little bit of that with Jordan Addison. But I think the overall skill set of Jordan Addison, I put him above Devontae Smith.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. I can't wait. I mean, that's a guy that I think he's been nothing but productive, and I just want to see at the next level. Let's move on to the 110, running back out of
this guy.
Running back out of Michigan, Blake Corum. Is that how you say it?
Blake Corum, yep.
5'8", 209. I'll tell you, a lot of guys are talking about him. He should be in the Heisman contention this year. You got Michigan undefeated, and he's been nothing but short of pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, 5'8", 209. He's a stout guy. Kind of reminds you a little bit of a Maurice Jones-Drew a little bit in terms of what he looks like. But from a skill set perspective, all the guy does is find the end zone. He finds pain, and he's explosive, and I'm excited for him. He's one of my favorite guys in college to watch. There was a Michigan game on. I love to go watch it. I did my first Devy League this year, and I was able to get Blake Corum in that draft, and I felt really, really good about it. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I think I'm curious to see where he lands and what offense he's in. Is it going to be with a team that has a good offensive line already, that has a run scheme that fits his skill sets? I think he has the ability to be a very good player at the next level. But I also know, there's some question marks around him a little bit too. But I think he's got great opportunity, great potential to be good at the next level.
Before we get on to our next running back, we got a question from, let me see this, Drizzy Jake. Drizzy Jake, there you go. Hey, guys, was wondering, would you rather have the rest of the season with Chubb or Taylor and full PPR?
That's a no-brainer.
That's a tough one. For me, I'm going to go with what we saw last week with Saturday at the helm. I would go with Taylor. I'm going to go with Taylor for a couple of reasons, because we're also going to be getting Deshaun Watson back here in a few weeks. And hypothetically, you might think that that's going to change their offense and where they want to go with their offense. You're going to see an uptick with them throwing the ball more. So for me, it's Taylor. But I mean, it's hard for me to say don't pick Nick Chubb in any other situation, because Nick Chubb, heck, you heard, we talked about it last week. Somebody asked Derrick Henry, hey, how's it feel to be the best running back in the league? And he says, you better go ask Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I love that. I love the selfless attitude and the ability to build others up. But for me, it's Jonathan Taylor, not just because of what Jeff Saturday did. And, sometimes coaching is simple, right? Give your best players the ball. But Jonathan Taylor, what he can do not only as a runner, as the RB1 last year at 1,800 yards, and he finds the end zone. And, of course, he came back this week and had a monster week. I just think you trade away Naheem Hines. Jordan Wilkins is not Naheem Hines. Zach Moss is certainly not going to get involved in the passing game. You're going to see Jonathan Taylor be involved in the passing game and get his touches every game in terms of the run game. I'm taking Jonathan Taylor the rest of the season.
Hey, that's a great problem to have, though. You're a lucky man.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
That's the problem.
Yeah, me too. I'm sitting here going, God, if I can just get Tristan Ebner, I'll be able to start him this week. Let's go to 111, Zach Evans, running back, 6 foot 215, one of the top high school prospects coming out a few years ago. Just like the author in this segment where he made this pick, it's pretty crazy that he's going to go at the 111. If he does, I'll be happy to get him at 111 easily.
Yeah, I think, this is when you get into I'm probably going Kayshon Boutte here. I also got him in my Debbie draft, so I'm big on I love his skill set. But I have not watched a lot of Zach Evans this year, so I don't want to speak too much on him. I'll dive more into the tape as we get to the end of the college football season and the NFL season is over. I spent a lot of time in the offseason breaking down college prospects for rookie rankings and diving into that. That's not a guy I've seen a lot of. So because of that, I don't want to make any comments that could sway somebody one way or the other. I'm curious to dive into the film on this one, but I love the next guy.
You love the next guy. Wide receiver, Kayshon Boutte out of, did I say that right? Or Boutte?
Kayshon Boutte.
Boutte, all right. It's not like I don't watch. I just cannot pronounce. You should hear me
booty,
take
for those of those like to say booty. You could just call him Kayshon Boutte.
You should hear me taking roll at school every day in my classes. Like the kids just look at me. All right, 6 foot 205. Yeah, not quite that bad. Wide receiver, 6 foot 205 yards. My first thoughts are, if you can get a wide receiver out of LSU, you go get that guy, because you look at what they have produced over the years, and it's been nothing but a wide receiver factory. Just you look at Jefferson, you look at Chase, and there's been plenty before. So I love his skill set. Watch a lot of them I think it was 2 weeks ago when they were on national TV. They try and find ways to get him the ball as much as often. And yeah, at 112, this is a steal.
So I'm going to give him some high praise here. In terms of his ability after the catch. He plays with physicality. He's got that A.J. Brown type feel to him. I wouldn't quite put him at that skill set in terms of running with the ball after the catch, but he gives me that upside. He's a guy that's a player I think he could develop into. I love his skill set. I loved him all offseason. I broke down some of his film. I think he's a complete route runner. I think he's got the ability to beat you at all three levels. What's interesting is in the Chip Kelly, and I always want to say the Chip Kelly offense is just they didn't use him properly in the first few games of the season. I saw a game, I think he had
time out. The article says Chip Kelly.
Yeah, that's not right. That's why it caught me off guard. I'm like, Brian Kelly. I'm like, Chip Kelly. But that's what I think is interesting.
If I was still editing there, it wouldn't say Chip Kelly.
I'm surprised that made it to publication. That's why I was trying to breeze past it, not to call it out to him. But I think with Brian Kelly, he just didn't use him well at the beginning of the year. I think he had 3 targets in the game. It was a close game. I wish I could remember they were playing. It was like game 3 of the year. He was out there. He's running routes. You look at the film. I think one of the commentators in the game broke down a play that Keyshawn Boutte was wide open. Didn't even look at him. So something was off. Now you're seeing as they're getting later in the year, they're starting to, utilize him more in the game, trying to, take advantage of a skill set. But I think he's a guy you could argue coming into the season had an opportunity to be the wide receiver one in this draft class. And I think he still has that opportunity. They touch on
agree. And if you're getting him this late in the draft, you got to be pretty damn. It's like getting George Pickens in the 2nd round last year.
Yeah, 100%.
Coach, that was fun. I've been wanting to talk about 2023 class for years, but now that we're getting closer, we'll continue to do so. Rookie drafts are always about hope. They haven't got hurt yet. They haven't, failed to be what we thought they would be. They're just glimmers of hope for our dynasty and dream draft teams. Coach, great show. Look forward to doing the Saturday morning show, or Sunday morning. Jeff Saturday has just screwed up.
He's messing it all up for everybody, man.
He did. But we'll be live this week at 8:00, and can't wait and hope to get a lot of you guys in there with your start and sit questions.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love throwing the prospects into this. Maybe we hit on a couple prospects every Wednesday and just kind of really take a deep dive into them. But hey, wish everybody luck. We're getting towards the fantasy playoffs here. We're kind of winding down the season, trying to get your rosters right. Take a look ahead, find out when your playoff weeks are, figure out who the matchups are, and start setting your roster up for success during the playoffs.
All right. I don't know who's breaking up, if it's me or him, but peace out. Appreciate you guys all, and we'll see you Sunday morning.